My ex-husband's new wife arrived at my doorstep with a smug grin. "We're here for our rightful share of your father's estate. Move out immediately." I smiled as my attorney stepped in behind her. The morning dew still clung to the daisies when I heard the crunch of expensive heels on my garden path. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. Only one person would dare to wear Louboutin to stomp through my father's cherished garden. Clara. Her voice dripped with false sweetness. "Still playing in the dirt, I see." I continued pruning my father's yellow daisies. The ones he had planted for my wedding day, the wedding that had ended in divorce papers, and my ex-husband running off with the woman now standing behind me. "Hello, Jenna. You know why I'm here." She moved closer, her shadow falling across the flower bed. "The reading of the will is tomorrow, and Mark and I think it's best if we discuss things civilly." I finally turned around, wiping my soil-covered hands on my gardening apron. "There's nothing to discuss. This is my father's house." "His estate," Jenna corrected, her perfectly painted lips curling into a smirk. "And since Mark was like a son to him for 15 years, we believe we're entitled to our fair share." The pruning shears in my hand suddenly felt heavier. The same Mark who had cheated on his wife with his secretary. "That Mark?" I asked incredulously. "Ancient history." Jenna waved her manicured hand dismissively. "He was forgiven. They still played golf every Sunday." She paused for dramatic effect. "Well, you know my father's death is still fresh, a wound that hasn't even begun to scab over. He's been gone just weeks, and here's this woman, this vulture, circling what she thinks is easy prey." "My father wouldn't have left Mark anything," I said firmly, standing tall. "He was many things, but he wasn't stupid." Jenna's fake smile faltered. "We'll see about that. Your brother, Ethan, seems to think differently." The mention of my brother sent a chill down my spine. We hadn't spoken since Dad's funeral, where he spent more time consoling Mark than his own sister. "You've spoken to Ethan?" "Oh, honey." Jenna stepped closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We've done more than speak. He's been very helpful." I gripped the pruning shears tighter, remembering Dad's words from years ago. The daisies need a firm hand, but never a cruel one. Even the sharpest thorn serves a purpose. "Get off my property, Jenna," I said quietly. "Before I forget my manners," she laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Your property? That's cute. This house is worth $1 million. Did you really think you could keep it all to yourself, playing house in your daddy's mansion while the rest of us get nothing?" "My father built this house brick by brick," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "He planted every tree, designed every room. This isn't about money, this is about legacy." "Legacy?" Jenna snorted. "Wake up, Maddie. Everything is about money. And tomorrow, when that will is read, you're going to learn that the hard way." She turned to leave, but paused at the garden gate. "Oh, and you might want to start packing. Mark and I will need at least a month to renovate before we move in." As her heels clicked down the path, I looked down at the daisies, their yellow petals now spotted with soil where my trembling hands had crushed them. Dad had always said yellow daisies represented joy and new beginnings, but all I could see was red. I pulled out my phone and dialed the one person I knew would understand. "Aaliyah, it's me. Jenna just paid me a visit. Yeah, she's exactly as bad as we thought. Can you come over? There's something about the will I need to discuss with you." My best friend's voice was firm and reassuring. "I'll be there in minutes. Don't worry, Maddie. Your father was smarter than they know." As I ended the call, I noticed a small envelope poking out from beneath one of the daisy bushes, its corner damp with dew. The handwriting was unmistakably my father's, and it was addressed to me. I picked it up with shaking hands, wondering how long it had been waiting there, hidden among the thorns. The paper felt heavy, like it carried more than just words. "Well, Dad," I whispered, turning the envelope over in my hands. "Looks like you left me one last surprise." The sound of Jenna's car engine faded into the distance as I stood in the garden, holding what felt like the first piece of a puzzle my father had left behind. Whatever game Jenna and Mark were playing, I had a feeling they were about to learn they'd chosen the wrong opponent. Aaliyah arrived exactly when she promised, her legal briefcase in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. "I figured we might need this," she said, holding up the wine as she walked into Dad's study. I was still holding the unopened envelope, perched on the edge of my father's leather chair. The room smelled of his pipe tobacco and old books, a scent I wasn't ready to lose to Jenna's promised renovations. "You haven't opened it yet?" Alia nodded at the envelope, setting her briefcase down with a heavy thunk. I wanted to wait for you. I turned the envelope over again after what Jenna said about Ethan helping them. Aaliyah insisted, pouring 2 generous glasses of wine. Your father was very specific about certain things being revealed at certain times. My head snapped up. What do you mean? She handed me a glass. Open the letter, Maddie. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small key. Dear Maddie, I read aloud, my father's voice echoing in my head. If you're reading this, then someone has already made a move on the estate. Knowing human nature as I do, I'm guessing it's Jenna. She always did remind me of a shark all teeth and no soul. Aaliyah snorted into her wineglass. The key enclosed opens the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside, you'll find everything you need to protect what's yours. Remember what I taught you about chess. Sometimes you have to sacrifice a pawn to protect the queen. Love, Dad. I looked up at Aaliyah, who was already moving toward the desk. You knew about this? I helped him set it up, she admitted, gesturing for me to use the key. Your father came to me months ago, right after his diagnosis. He knew exactly how things would play out. The drawer opened with a soft click. Inside was a thick manila envelope and a USB drive. Before you look at those, Aaliyah said, sitting on the edge of the desk, there's something you need to know about tomorrow's will reading. Your father added a codicil 3 days before he died. A what? A modification to the will, and trust me, it's going to change everything. I spread the contents of the manila envelope across the desk. Photos spilled out 2 of them, Jenna meeting with someone in a dark parking lot, Mark entering a lawyer's office that wasn't Aaliyah's. Bank statements, email printouts, Dad had them investigated. Better. Aaliyah's smile was sharp. He had them followed. That USB drive contains video footage of Jenna attempting to bribe your father's nurse for information about his will 2 days before he died. My hands shook as I picked up one of the photos. Is that Ethan meeting with Jenna? 3 weeks before your father's death, Aaliyah confirmed. But look at his face in the next photo. The second photo showed my brother leaving the meeting, his expression twisted with disgust. He was holding what looked like a check. He kept the check as evidence, Aaliyah explained. Brought it straight to your father. That's when Dad knew he had to act fast. But Jenna said Ethan was helping them. Your brother's been playing a dangerous game, Maddie feeding them just enough information to keep them confident, all while helping your father gather evidence of their conspiracy. I sank back into the chair, my mind spinning. Why didn't he tell me? Because Jenna needed to show her hand first. Aaliyah pulled out some papers from her briefcase. Tomorrow, when I read the will, Jenna and Mark are going to think they've won. The initial reading will grant them a significant portion of the estate. I stood up so fast my wineglass tipped over, staining the carpet red. Let me finish. Aaliyah held up her hand. That's when the codicil kicks in. Your father set up a trap, Maddie. The moment they accept the inheritance, they trigger a clause that reveals their attempted manipulation and fraud. Everything, the photos, the videos, the bribes, becomes public record. I stared at the evidence spread across the desk, understanding dawning. He made them think they won so they'd incriminate themselves. Exactly. Aaliyah's grin was triumphant. The real will leaves everything to you with a trust set up for Ethan. Jenna and Mark get nothing except a very public exposure of their true characters. And tomorrow, Aaliyah finished her wine, we'll watch them walk right into the trap they set for themselves. Your father's last lesson about consequences. I picked up his letter again, running my fingers over his familiar handwriting. Even from beyond the grave, he was protecting me, teaching me, helping me fight back. One more thing, Aaliyah said softly. Ethan asked to see you tonight. He has something else you need to know before tomorrow. I looked out the study window at the setting sun, thinking of my brother, of Jenna's smug face in the garden, of all the pieces my father had carefully put in place. Tell him to come over, I said. It's time we had a family reunion. Ethan arrived after dark, looking nothing like the confident brother who had stood beside Mark at the funeral. His designer suit was wrinkled, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He hesitated at the study doorway, clutching a leather portfolio like a shield. You look terrible, I said, breaking the ice. Yeah, well, playing double agent isn't as fun as the movies make it seem. He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Can I come in? I gestured to the chair across from me. Aaliyah had left an hour ago. but the evidence of our earlier discovery still littered Dad's desk. "I see you found Dad's insurance policy," Ethan said, nodding at the photos. "Why didn't you tell me what you were doing?" The question came out sharper than I intended. He slumped into the chair. "Because I needed to make it right. After everything with Mark, the way I treated you during the divorce, I was an idiot." "You were my brother," I corrected. "You were supposed to be on my side." "I know." He opened the portfolio and pulled out a check. "This is what Jenna offered Meadow testify that Dad wasn't of sound mind when he made his final will. $500,000 to betray my own sister." I stared at the check, then at my brother. "But you didn't cash it?" "Number." I took it straight to Dad. Ethan's voice cracked. "You should have seen his face, Maddie. Not angry, just disappointed. That's when he told me about his plan." The grandfather clock in the hall chimed, each dong echoing through the tense silence. "There's more," Ethan continued, pulling out a phone. "I recorded everything. Every meeting. Every offer. Every threat. Jenna? She's been planning this for months, even before Dad got sick." He pressed play. Jenna's voice filled the room. "Once the old man kicks it, we'll contest the will with your testimony about his mental state and Mark's long relationship with him. We'll get everything that Maddie won't know what hit her." My hands clenched into fists. "When was this?" 2 months ago. "But wait, there's worse." He fast-forwarded the recording. Mark's voice now. "We sell the house, liquidate the assets. Maddie can go back to her little apartment and her pathetic gardening business. She never deserved any of this anyway." "Turn it off," I whispered. Ethan complied, then pulled out one final document. "This is why I came tonight. Jenna didn't just want the money, Maddie. She wanted revenge on you." "Revenge for what?" "For making Mark feel guilty. For making him pay alimony." He paused. "For making him look bad when you caught them together." The memory hit me like a physical blow walking into my own bedroom, finding them there, Jenna's triumphant smile as my marriage crumbled. "She was his secretary for 3 years," Ethan continued. "She planned everything. Worked her way into his life, into Dad's social circle. This document proves she started embezzling from Dad's company 6 months before you caught them." I snatched the paper, scanning the bank transfers and account numbers. "Dad knew about this?" "He found out right before his diagnosis. He was building a case against her, but then the cancer." Ethan's voice trailed off. "That's when he started planning this." "Instead," I said, "sometimes justice needs a different path." "The codicil," Ethan murmured. "Yeah, tomorrow's going to be brutal, Maddie. They think they've got it all figured out. Jenna's even hired a camera crew to document the historic moment when they take possession of the estate." "Despite everything," I laughed. "She hired cameras to record her own downfall. Dad would have appreciated the irony." Ethan smiled. A real one this time. "Listen, I know I can't fix the past 3 years with one night of revelations, but I want you to know I'm here now. Whatever happens tomorrow, I've got your back." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at Dad's garden, silvered by moonlight. "Remember when we were kids and Dad caught us fighting over that toy car?" "The red Corvette." Ethan joined me at the window. "He made us wash every window in the house. Said we needed to learn to see things clearly." I turned to face my brother. "I see clearly now, Ethan. I see what Dad was trying to teach us, even at the end." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes the biggest victory isn't in winning. It's in letting your enemies defeat themselves." I finished. The grandfather clock chimed 1/4 past, reminding us that tomorrow was getting closer with each tick. "You should get some rest," Ethan said, gathering his evidence. "Tomorrow's going to be one hell of a show." As I watched him leave, I touched the window pane, cool and solid under my fingers. Dad had always loved these windows, said they were the eyes of the house, watching over his family. Tomorrow, they would witness justice served exactly the way he had planned it. The morning of the will reading dawned bright and clear. I was in Dad's study again, this time watching Alia arrange papers on the massive oak desk while camera equipment was set up around the room. "Jenna's camera crew is here," Ethan announced, slipping through the door. "You should see her out there practicing her gracious acceptance speech." "Everything ready?" I asked Alia. She patted her briefcase. "All set. The codicil is sealed in this envelope, along with copies of all the evidence. Once they accept the initial terms." A commotion in the hallway cut her off. Jenna's voice carried through the door, high and excited. This is where we'll put the new chandelier. The old one is so dated. Places, everyone. Alia muttered, straightening her suit jacket. Let the show begin. Jenna swept in first, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Mark followed, looking uncomfortable in his tailored suit. The camera crew trailed behind them, adjusting lights and checking angles. Maddie. Mark nodded stiffly. It was the first time he'd spoken to me directly since the divorce. Let's begin, Alia announced, taking her place behind Dad's desk. As Miles's attorney, I'll be reading his last will and testament, along with any additional documents he prepared before his passing. Jenna practically bounced in her seat. We're ready! The initial reading went exactly as Alia had warned me. Dad's estate, including the house and company shares, was to be divided 60% to me, 40% to Mark and Jenna. I knew it! Jenna squealed, grabbing Mark's arm. Miles loved us too much to leave us out. However, Alia continued, her voice cutting through Jenna's celebration. There was a codicil to the will, added 3 days before Miles's death. Jenna's smile faltered. A what? A modification, Mark explained, suddenly looking nervous. What kind of modification? Alia broke the seal on the envelope. The acceptance of any inheritance under this will is contingent upon a full investigation into certain financial irregularities discovered in the months preceding Miles's death. The room went silent. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. What irregularities? Jenna's voice had lost its triumphant edge. Perhaps these will explain, Alia said, sliding the photos across the desk. Or this USB drive containing footage of attempted bribery. Or these bank statements showing systematic embezzlement from Harrison Industries. Mark grabbed one of the photos, his face draining of color. Where did you get these? Dad had quite the collection of evidence. Ethan spoke up from his corner. Including recordings of you both planning to contest the will based on false testimony about his mental state. Jenna stood up so fast her chair toppled backward. Turn those cameras off now! Oh no, I said, standing to face her. The cameras stay. You wanted to document this historic moment, remember? You can't do this, she hissed. Mark, tell them they can't do this. But Mark was still staring at the photos, particularly one showing him entering a competitor's office with confidential company documents. The codicil is quite clear, Alia continued, professional as ever. Any attempt to claim inheritance automatically triggers the release of all this evidence to the proper authorities. The choice is yours. Choice? Jenna laughed hysterically. What choice? You've trapped us. No, I corrected her. You trapped yourselves. Every scheme, every plot, every attempt to steal what wasn't your sit all led to this moment. This is your fault. She whirled on Ethan. You were supposed to help us. Ethan shrugged. I did help, just not you. Mark, she pleaded, do something. But Mark was already standing, straightening his tie with shaking hands. It's over, Jenna. We've lost. The hell it is, she shouted. I won't let that expletive win. That expletive is my daughter. Dad's voice filled the room. Everyone froze as Alia pressed play on a video file. Dad's face appeared on one of the camera crew's monitors, thin but determined, recorded just days before his death. And if you're watching this, it means you've shown your true colors, just as I knew you would. Greed is a terrible teacher, but consequences are excellent students. Jenna's mascara ran in black streaks as she backed toward the door. This isn't over! Actually, Alia said, it is. The police are waiting in the foyer to discuss the evidence of embezzlement. I'd suggest cooperating. It might help with sentencing. As Jenna and Mark were led away, the cameras still rolling, I felt Dad's presence in every corner of the room. He'd orchestrated it all not just to protect his legacy, but to teach one final lesson about justice and patience. Well, Ethan said into the silence, I guess those cameras caught their historic moment after all. The media circus that followed was exactly what Jenna had wanted, just not in the way she'd planned. By evening, local news vans lined the street, and my phone wouldn't stop buzzing with calls from reporters. You need to see this, Ethan said, turning up the volume on Dad's old television in the study. Jenna's arrest was playing on every channel, her mascara-streaked face a stark contrast to her designer dress as officers led her to a police car. The investigation into Harrison Industries has uncovered multiple instances of fraud. The reporter's voice droned. Turn it off, I said, rubbing my temples. I can't watch anymore. Alia burst through the door, waving her phone. It gets better. The DA just called. They found offshore accounts, dummy corporations, everything. Jenna wasn't just stealing from your father's company. She was running a whole network of fraud schemes. And Mark? I asked, not sure why I still cared about my ex-husband's fate. Singing like a canary, Ethan replied. Turns out he's not so loyal when facing serious prison time. A sharp knock at the study door made us all jump. A police detective entered, looking apologetic. Miss Harrison, we need to discuss some additional evidence we've uncovered. More? I gestured for him to sit. What now? We found documents in Miss West's apartment suggesting this wasn't her first attempt at this type of scheme. There are at least 3 other cases of her targeting wealthy families, though she never succeeded on this scale before. Aaliyah leaned forward. Other families? Yes. She would typically work her way into their lives through employment or social connections, then orchestrate situations to gain access to their assets. The detective pulled out a folder. Sound familiar? The secretary position, I whispered. It wasn't random. No, it wasn't. She specifically targeted your ex-husband because of his connection to your father's company. The affair was just her way in. My stomach churned. 3 years of blame and self-doubt about my failed marriage suddenly shifted perspective. There's something else, the detective continued. We found this in her personal files. He handed me a document that made my blood run cold, detailed notes about accidents that could befall me after the transfer of property. Plans to frame Ethan for financial misconduct, even sketches of how she wanted to remodel the house, starting with destroying Dad's garden. She would have killed me, I said flatly. She never would have gotten the chance, Ethan growled, gripping the arm of his chair. The detective nodded grimly. This evidence upgrades the charges significantly. Combined with the fraud charges and attempted bribery, she's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. After he left, we sat in stunned silence until Alia's phone buzzed again. It's my contact at the DA's office, she said, reading the message. Mark just finished his statement. He's admitted to everything, including helping Jenna access confidential company files before Dad's death. Did he know? I had to ask about her plans for me. No, Ethan answered, scanning the documents. According to this, she kept that part to herself. Probably knew he wouldn't have the stomach for it. A thought struck me. Dad knew, didn't he? That's why he put all this in motion. Aaliyah nodded slowly. He suspected. That's why he hired the private investigators, why he documented everything. He wasn't just protecting his legacy, he was protecting you. I walked to the window, looking out at the garden now swarming with news crews. The daisies still bloomed, oblivious to the chaos their previous admirer had planned. We should release a statement, Ethan suggested. Control the narrative before Jenna's lawyers try to spin this. Already drafted, Aaliyah pulled out her laptop. A simple statement about cooperating with authorities and requesting privacy during this difficult time. Professional, dignified everything Jenna isn't. Dad would like that, I said, managing a small smile. There's one more thing, Ethan said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. I found this in Dad's personal safe. It's marked, "After justice is served." My hands shook as I opened it, recognizing Dad's handwriting once again. My dear Maddie, if you're reading this, then the truth has finally come to light. Don't let this experience harden your heart. The garden still needs tending, and life still needs living. I didn't set this trap just for justice. I did it so you could be free from doubt, free from fear, and free to bloom again. Love, Dad. I walked back to the house in a daze, clutching the deed and letter. Ethan and Alia were waiting in the kitchen. Well? Ethan asked. I spread the deed on the counter. He bought me the lot next to my old shop. He wanted me to expand the business. That's not all he did. Alia pulled out her tablet. The Harrison Gardens trademark was registered 6 months ago. He set up everything: business plans, permits, funding. All it needs is you. That's not all he did. Alia pulled out her tablet. The Harrison Gardens trademark was registered 6 months ago. He set up everything: business plans, permits, funding. All it needs is you. And us, Ethan added. I've learned a thing or two about gardening these past months. Someone had to keep his orchids alive. A knock at the door interrupted us. The detective entered, looking pleased. Just thought you'd want to know 3 more victims of Jenna's schemes have come forward with their testimony, and your father's evidence is looking at closing over a dozen cold cases. Dad would have liked that, I said. He always believed every truth finds its light eventually. Speaking of truth, Ethan said after the detective left, I found something else while tending the greenhouse. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo of a small plaque hidden among the orchids. The inscription read, "For Maddie, who taught me that the strongest flowers grow in broken places." He put that there right after my divorce, I realized. He knew even then that I'd find my way back. So, Alia said, pulling out her legal pad with a familiar glint in her eye, should I start drawing up the business papers for Harrison Gardens? I looked out at Dad's garden, where the daisies still bloomed despite everything that had happened. Beyond them, I could see the future he'd planned for me, not just justice, but growth. Not just survival, but flourishing. Yes, I said, feeling stronger than I had in years. It's time to grow something new. To Dad. Ethan raised his coffee mug. Alia added, raising hers. I picked up my own mug, thinking of orchids and daisies, of truth and time, of endings and beginnings. To blooming again. Through the window, the garden glowed in the afternoon sun. Each flower a testament to Dad's belief that beauty can grow even in life's hardest soil. He'd given me more than justice. He'd given me back my future one bloom at a time.